So I wanted to start today's session by just sort of doing a quick recap of some suggestions that you guys made yesterday in changing the wording of some of the agreements based on where we left off when discussion of the standards. And let me know if I'm getting that somewhat right. We will be talking about that at the executive committee as well and following up on that. Is this on? Mm-hmm. Okay. So I had as one of the things that we needed to add was for, if you'll open your agendas to the front cover, inside front cover. We had left out some language on the next to the last bullet down regarding the tiered assessment and exactly where that played out. And we had left out language that refers to a tiered assessment, the $250 being for a 3-credit-hour course. So I need to add the amounts for the tiers and the amount of semester hours that we're recommending for that. On the last bullet, we need to add language about the, let me go back to the, I need to add language to the CLEP policy on the last bullet so that we talk about, we put some language around as appropriate so that an institution would accept the CLEP test from another institution or accept the CLEP test only if the institution offers the course itself and only if that course is relevant to the student's program of study. And then we had some discussion about whether the agreements on transfer policies should be revised particularly based on our difficulties in transcripting the post certification. So we want to maybe talk about that a little bit. Before we do that, Christy, could you mention the idea you brought to me this morning and sort of get a feel for the group about the post and ACE?
Just that I thought that if we got ACE to come in and evaluate post certifications across the state of Georgia, then that would answer the question of whether the courses were equivalent from post to post. It would be an outside objective view, and if we could, I know it's expensive, but if we could build the funding of that into the next round of the grant, that would serve the entire state well and advance us in that very rapidly. Whereas, you know, if we tried to pull together our faculty from across all the institutions and try to do this at all the posts, I think it would be a much more laborious and drawn-out process.
So any reactions to that? Sounded like a really good use of resources to me, so we'll do some further discussion of that. I just wanted you to know that that was on the table. Is there anything that I did not capture from our discussion yesterday as far as the agreements? Okay, then. I'm going to turn it over to Catherine.
Okay. I have this. Thanks. So welcome back. When I was looking at our notes from yesterday, I was pretty impressed with the amount of ground that we covered yesterday. So I just wanted to do a very quick recap, adding on to what Trish just said, and then we can circle back to any of these items. And in terms of the CAEL standards, we have not discussed fully yet number 8, although maybe what you just said is enough, which is the fees. And then the last 2 CAEL standards and the corresponding consortium agreements. So I thought it was helpful yesterday that you brought out some key external forces that could have implications and impact on the initiatives and goals of the consortium. Certainly the whole consortium is organized around trying to address the needs of adult learners, so that's a given. But we heard yesterday about the SAC's 25% rule and how that's being interpreted, implications possibly for the collaborative online degree program. What are those implications? And the inclusion or exclusion of transfer credit and PLA credit as part of or not part of that 25% rule. We had quite a lot of discussion around that yesterday. And I think this is one of those, an area that Mike Johnson has invited or will invite a group to come and talk, negotiate.
As I mentioned yesterday, Mike did suggest to us that we should perhaps get together a SACS group and USG group as soon as possible to make sure that we were going to be in compliance, and so that we could sort of talk about those issues before we go out on the limb and then get sick for non-compliance. So it's a very positive step that they're willing to talk, and we'll certainly follow up on that. I've asked a couple of you already if you would like to be in on those discussions, so we may be calling on you for that.
Okay, so we also talked about the federal regulations, about the credit hour policy, and is your name Christine? Kristen, sorry. And could you just say again how you summarized your understanding of this?
Of the credit hour. But what's happened is the credit hour policy's always been in place. But if you're involved at all with online or blended education, the program integrity rules came out in October of 2010. And they're being enforced, and this whole idea of the new credit hour policy that's been put in place, we're supposed to be in compliance as of July 2011. So we have 1 year to this coming July 2012 to be in compliance. And I'll just read you one quick thing from the PowerPoint that I'm sharing with some of the people at the table. But it says, under the new definition, credit hour means an amount of work represented in intended learning outcomes and verified by evidence of student achievement that is institutionally established equivalency that reasonably approximates not less than, then it goes into the actual time. But it's everything we're talking about, outcomes, assessment, and then it talks about how you're gonna work with lab work, internships, practica. And it goes down to things such as how are you going to measure it, who's going to be reviewing it. Faculty are inherently responsible for the quality, for the rigor in ensuring the students get there. And the last line I'll tell you, it says, for example, what is the role of accreditors with respect to the new definition of the credit hour? An accreditor must take appropriate actions to address an institution's credit hour deficiencies and must notify the Department of Ed if it finds systemic noncompliance or significant noncompliance in one or more programs. And so it's right there. Mm-hmm. So if we're not showing what the outcomes are, how we're measuring that the quality and the rigor has been established through policies, because they want to see policies, it could be a problem. So this is for online and blended, but it's supposed to be building on what you have in place for your on-campus programs.
Is this an area that you want to come back and talk more about today? Or are people comfortable, okay with how you're proceeding on this? You're okay? Okay, we'll see. We heard yesterday also from Complete Degree Georgia, which was a real pat on the back for the consortium. It's highlighting the consortium and making it more visible, but I think it's also as implications would be what then are the priorities for the consortium given the role or the spotlight that it's getting in the Complete Degree Georgia, and what influence does the consortium want to have on the directions of Degree Complete Georgia. So those are bigger issues probably for the executive committee and the system office. And then Andy brought up, Andy, is that right? Yeah. The open learning, I say movement because I think it is becoming a movement where courses are being offered, high quality courses are being offered for free, and students may be bringing that learning to your particular campus. So in the long term, it really pushes the assessment agenda, could push the assessment agenda, and continues to press on what are the roles and responsibilities of faculty. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think this is one of those places where some of the agreements and some of the standards for assessment of learning collide.
Okay.
Okay, because we're talking about, for example, the recommended amount for a 3-credit course is $250. okay, of which, a small amount is administrative, a lot goes to the faculty. A little math tells me that's $80 a credit. Okay, we normally don't sell our credits that cheaply. Okay, the standards say that the fee charged for assessment should be based on services performed in the process and not determined by the amount of credit awarded. And while I guess I philosophically agree with that point, right, the faculty at my university still do prefer to be paid. Okay, and to the degree that these free online courses or low-cost online courses or MOOCs or any one of the 1,000 other variations on this that are out there become popular, then we're going to have kind of a longer line of students who are looking for us to validate their learning and not for us to provide the instruction, so to speak. So how big will that get? I don't know, okay? But I do know that it's my core faculty who are, I think, the most at risk. Okay, the people who are teaching the core courses, because these are the first courses that are going to show up this way and that have shown up this way. And to the degree that we're going to be charging $50, for example, which is what we currently charge for a challenge exam, okay, or $250 for assessment of a portfolio or, whatever it is, right? I guess my question is, how do I pay my faculty? Okay, $200 for each student coming by, I don't think actually keeps the wolf from the door. And if different universities in the system have different rates, so, if Valdosta decides, okay, we're going to adhere to this, and we're going to be doing this for $50, and SPSU decides, no, we actually prefer to pay our faculty, and so we're going to go with 85% of whatever our normal credit rate is, okay, then people are going to head to Valdosta, right, to get this done, and now we're really in a bad situation. Okay, so I think this is a big question, and it's one that really is going to require a systemic answer.
Do you want to address that?
I can just, it's a bit ironic because we arrived at the 250 because when we started at VSU, they were giving the faculty member $50. So this was a huge jump in salary, actually. And it was designed to try and hit that problem of we normally pay faculty for instruction and not for assessment. So I think, and the term you used really interested me, which was validation, which I see is different from assessment. So I think it just sort of plays into the questions that we were beginning to get into yesterday about what's the role of faculty, and is the role of faculty limited to giving of instruction? And then if you redefine the role, then you can redefine the pay scale, I would think, or the compensation methodology along with it. And then just one other small item, when we did set that fee, we agreed as a consortium to accept that fee. Now that can certainly be revisited if needed. Part of that negotiation was that we had 2-year colleges and 4-year colleges at the table with different tuition rates. So we tried to set something that would be reasonable for all parties and still provide some ability for an underrepresented student to save money by going that route rather than the standard route.
Well, the analogy that I've been using in discussions is an e-book, okay, as opposed to a print book, right? A lot of people thought that with the advent of e-books, you'd now be able to get, the Encyclopedia Britannica for $9.98 or something, right? Because it's a virtual encyclopedia, so to speak. But the business model doesn't work that way, and the e-book generally costs 80, 85, 90% of the printed book because it's not about the paper. Okay, it's about the content. And so similarly with a course, right, my concern, again, is that, if we lose whatever percent it is, okay, to self-paced online free learning that we're now assessing, okay, then either, whatever, depending on what that percentage is, we either have to retrench or we need to change our business model, okay? And it seems to me that changing the business model is the better path.
Do we have experience in the room with at your own institutions where you're addressing this for your faculty? Or you share the question and the issue?
Has anybody, I mean, we're all so new at this, the question of whether anyone is bringing that free online learning to us for assessment. I mean, I don't think we're there yet. We don't have any experience, or do some of us have experience with
But
it?
see, I don't know if we're saying free online learning versus experiential learning. What the adult learner's experiential learning was is that I sit and I've worked for 15 years at AFLAC, risen through the ranks as an assistant HR manager, and now I've plateaued. In order for me to move into a senior VP position of HR or become the HR director, I need my college degree. So I'm going to come back to college to get my degree, and I want to bring my experiential learning with me to help me out in my business classes. So I get intro to business, or I get financial management. I don't get the core English or the core math. And I'm not coming with free experiential, I don't get free learning online that I'm getting evaluated. It's my experiential learning having been there. So I don't know if what you're asking is you're attacking, not attacking, but you're looking at core or as free learning, and we're starting to skew, or maybe it is we need to start talking about that. You see what I'm saying? Maybe
do.
that is we need to talk about it.
Well, see, I don't know how to
It may come
separate
up.
them.
I know.
I think they're on. They're
just.
just. They're.
It's all
They're all on the
learning.
same. It's on
Yeah.
this continuum. It's just the open learning is another avenue that our students might be wanting to pursue. It's. But it's anything that's outside.
It's open learning what we're defining it. I mean, that's the question, I think, because, I don't know, I come at it in a different way, and I look at it.
I think part of what we're defining is non-sponsored learning. I'm trying to go back to my course through
Right.
Catherine Hill.
Let me see. Let me look at the book.
Any learning that did not occur within the institution. So that could include a continuum of learning that you got from an online course or online source or hobbies or business or a whole range of things where you could have gained that knowledge.
Yeah, Andy was bringing up, I think, and here's another arena that our prospective students might be learning in, whether they learn from an open course, free course, or whether they're learning from their experience on the job. They're bringing the same, I have learning to be, I want to document and have assessed, and it's pushing the question that you're raising. If we're really going to create systems to welcome that kind of learning, then yeah, what is the business model that will support the faculty, that will incent them to be open to redefining or their roles or expanding the repertoire of what they do? And is it compensated by money, workload? How does it figure in promotion and tenure? Those are big issues.
I'm wondering if I could ask Neil if he has any thoughts. Neil's been involved for a good many years in the online learning repositories and development of that. Has there been any discussion within that community about the faculty role in that? No? Okay. So, and I'd like to maybe talk a little bit more about SV's use of the term validate and how that fits into your ideas of what assessment is.
Okay. So let's go back to you. Did you use validate intentionally as a replacement for, as different from assessment?
Yes,
Okay,
I think
can
so,
you
because,
talk about?
in effect, we do kind of two things. Okay, we do assessment, which is basically, where in the continuum the student's learning is, okay? And then ultimately we validate, meaning this person has met whatever the threshold standard is, so we're willing to send them out of here as an engineer, as a botanist, as a sociologist, as a, whatever it is, okay? And I think what's gonna happen, and it's already happening, okay, is students are coming in with more of a patchwork of things. Okay, so the fraction of students who show up on your doorstep with 0 credits and walk out of your door with 120 credits, or whatever the requirement is going to be dropping, and it's going to continue to drop. Okay, and so instead, what we're going to get is students who are coming in with credits from the military, coming in with credits from CLEP, coming in with AP credits, coming in with learning experiential credits, coming in with this thing that they took online that was part of a MOOC, coming in, with the free course, coming in with self-study, coming in with God knows what, because everything in the economy and everything in terms of how the quality of online offerings and the way that they're being put out there is all pushing in the same direction, okay? And, no doubt, the faculty's response was, well, they said that to Gutenberg too, right? And that didn't happen then, and then they said it when videotape was derived, and yes, I remember the College of the Air, right? When this was going to happen on television, and this has never happened. Students don't learn that way, okay? And I've made that argument, okay? But I also see what's there online. And when I compare what's there online of the very best stuff, and I compare it with what goes on in a classroom, especially a classroom that has 200 kids in it, they're at least equal. And I'm pretty certain that the online version is often better, okay? And so the point is that if you have to pay for the worse version, and you can get the better version for free or next to it, people aren't idiots. Or at least not the people who want to get our degrees.
There is a difference, though, between content delivery and instruction.
Yes, there is.
And
Okay?
so all that free stuff is content delivery for the most part.
For the most part, but that's why I said the very best ones, where there actually is interactivity built in to the software. That's not common. Okay, most of it's still pure content, but that's beginning to show up. Okay, and I think that, content we can win against. Okay, but even there, we've got the problem. Okay, because, we've got the state government, we've got the federal government wanting to have more college degrees because more college degrees is better, because God said that. Okay, and they're not so much interested in what that means. Because, if they can say the number of college degrees went up 15% and it's something that I did, darn it, because I was governor, right? That's a wonderful platform to run on. Okay, what that degree is worth is another question. Okay, and so that's why I think we're going to be asked not only to assess, but to validate. Okay, yeah, this person really is an engineer, this person really is a sociologist and so forth, and they can go out and practice in their field, so to speak. Okay, and we were able to do it now for, $19.95. Right, that's kind of the issue that we're facing. Okay, I think we're going to be called on to do that.
You've given me a great idea for a new proprietary school, I think I'll resign this afternoon and go.
There are people who are doing just that.
Right, Kristen?
It's interesting because I only brought the SAC stuff up, not because it has to do with online, but the same expectations are not on campus. So what I read to you are the new regulations for online and blended programs. I guarantee what we're training our faculty to do at Armstrong, if you're going to teach online and blended, we don't do that in our faculty development for on campus. We don't go in and say, okay, show me your lesson plan. Where are your stated objectives for that week? What are your learning outcomes?
Yep.
What type of assessments are you doing? How are you engaging those students? How are you going to manage 3 hours of face-to-face instruction along with 2 hours for every credit hour? So the fact that that discussion is there is going to greatly benefit PLA, because when you're saying, what is it we're giving credit for? I guarantee you can walk into a lot of courses, and I'm not sure they could tell you exactly what those learning outcomes are, what the assessment. I think they can say, here are the assignments, here's what I do, but not to that finite level. So it's a great time to be involved in this and moving forward. So it's not so much the online component. Mark Ridley has been a huge inspiration with what they're doing at Columbus State, because our challenge at Armstrong has been, we want to embrace the military, we want to embrace PLA. Our focus is core. Coming from an institution where it was heavily driven, more research one, not so much the liberal arts. Liberal arts faculty do not give up easily. And what I have found is you have to be creative, because they will move forward if you can commit to academic excellence and rigor, and you're not going to give away the bank. So Mark said to us with PLA, have you considered, instead of saying, here's an English course, here's a philosophy course, creating a minor? So they have a minor in, I think, what is it, leadership management and something, so they can bring in the PLA credit and avoid some of those heated battles within those areas. So I think it's how you're creative, because the liberal arts, especially in the core, aren't going to give up easily. And if there's a question of whether or not you give them credit, it's just something to think about.
So that's one of the issues that came up yesterday in relation to CAEL standard number 4 was, okay, we're going to do the assessment, we're going to grant credit. Where does that credit go?
Yes.
What level, what program? Is it toward the major? Is it elective? Is it just in that, yes, you get credit? How is it really helping the student advance toward completion? And then how does it add to the mix?
And your wording is perfect, because you asked yesterday, ALC can't tell you how to do that, nor should they. But your wording says there needs to be an expert on campus, and that's what SAC says. It's not our job to tell you, but there should be somebody making that determination, because the business schools are a whole conundrum in terms of you can't even expand online because it has to do with the faculty, full-time faculty in actual seat space at a university.
It's part of the vision that you have, that with the spotlight on prior learning assessment and and the online, the expectations for online and blended, that will eventually trickle into the more
It is
conventional
now in all
part.
of our training, sure. I mean, especially 508 compliance, I mean, all of that. So, but it is trickling down, and it's making a big difference.
Did you want to make a comment?
I'd like to hear, and forgive me if this was talked about yesterday, I'd like to hear more about what you just said. So you're saying that people would not be bringing in effect, credit for core courses, but would be bringing in credit for something else?
For example, we have some wonderful health professions programs. So we have military that are coming in that have been trained medics with unbelievable experiential learning. But we can't give them English. I mean, we can't give them philosophy. I mean, we can't give them certain things. But we're looking at how do we creatively quantify that and create an area for which they can get the credits. And we got that. I don't know, Mark, if you want to explain more about what you've done, with that one minor. But our faculty had no problems with that. Nobody wanted to give up their areas. But the minute we said, could we create something within these areas? Because all the research, if you read this document, it's fabulous. If you look at like Latino students that came in with no prior learning assessment, I think the graduation rate was maybe 6%. Once they got prior learning assessment, went up to 22. I think nationally, if you get PLA, there's like a 13% increase or something of graduation. It's something big, or you're more than likely 2 out of 3 to graduate. But whatever the data is, it's there. So we just have to figure out how to proactively do it without jeopardizing the core liberal arts curriculum that we're promoting, and get the buy-in from the faculty and make sure they're getting credit for what they actually do know, and not just saying, well, just get philosophy, when they may actually need that philosophy, and we're not giving them the best education possible just for the sake of giving credit.
I think maybe you're fooling yourself in the sense that, yeah, I like the idea of what you're saying, okay? And I think that it'll work for a few minutes, okay? But the problem is, I think that the stuff that is available online, okay, in these high-quality online courses, which people are talking about lower and lower and lower prices for, are your basic liberal arts courses, are your basic business courses, are your basic courses, okay? Because that's where the bodies are, and that's where the money, such as there's money to be made, can be made. Okay, so the straighter line folks who are, doing this for $100 a course, that's precisely the courses that they've targeted for very obvious reasons. I teach in organic chemistry. Nobody's going to mess with that, okay? Because the entire student body taking it is 8 people, all right? There's no money to be made, okay? But, you know, freshman economics, yeah, there's money to be made there, right? Freshman comp, huge money to be made there if we grant credits for it. And the mechanisms that we're developing for granting credit for this, how do we say no to that? That's the question, okay? Because the mechanism that we're using here, that you're saying, okay, we can keep it in this little corner. How do you keep it in that
Oh,
little
I'm not
corner?
saying
I don't think we
I'm
can.
not saying it's one or the other. I mean, you just have to proactively look at different ways to deal with the different transcripts. I guess I'm confused with the online, because it doesn't have to be online. It could be,
No, it could be anything.
No, but for
yeah.
example, if I go to MIT's programs, totally free, totally online, and I take a course in the great philosophers from MIT, or I've seen advertised things like world literature or those world civ classes that are your basic liberal arts core classes.
Right.
And I'm with the greatest minds and the greatest reading, and I am passionate about that subject, and I do that online course. And then I come to you and I say, okay, I've learned all this stuff. I want to be evaluated. How is that any different? I mean, it doesn't matter where I learned it.
well, it's
And
up
it may
to-
be better than what you would have given me on campus. So, I mean, that comes back to exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
Oh, I certainly haven't excluded that. I mean, I don't think anything's
No, but
excluded.
all I was
but there were-
reacting to was
yeah.
what you said with regard, your faculty, you were saying, were highly resistant until they got it off their turf.
Well,
And I'm
partially,
saying this
yeah.
is going to bring it right back onto their turf. That's the only point I was making.
I'm curious what everybody's challenge exam policies are. Do you, in terms of, can I take that philosophy class and then come to ask for a challenge exam for philosophy 101 or 102 at your institution? Does everybody have a policy that you can challenge anything? Or
You've got to have a challenge exam created by the department. It's
Right,
only
if I-
available in the departments that have those.
if I come and ask for it, is there any obligation to create it
No.
as a student?
But what would prevent me from creating a portfolio where I give, here's the syllabus, here's all the readings that I did, and I write an essay answering one of these great philosophical questions or two, and I stick that in my portfolio to show that I've absorbed it all and I've integrated it all, and, you know, I was,
Okay.
and I submit that as a portfolio.
Yeah,
Then you're not dealing with challenge
No.
exams.
Right, but I think it really raises, it kind of hits at a key point in the consortium learning agreements, if I understand it, is look to what is the institution offering? Is it CLEP? Is it a challenge exam? You know, what's already existing, the avenue that the student can use? If that doesn't exist, then the department has a choice. They can create a challenge exam, or the student gets to go to portfolio, right? So, yeah, the options are there, but it does really push back on the institution or the department to say, what are we going to do? Because the consortium agreement says the student has to have some option, right? Isn't that what it's?
So I could go, if I did the MIT philosophy, I could go to any consortium school and demand some sort of evaluation.
Sure.
right?
Well, sure. What-
Except us, because we don't offer
Yes, I will.
philosophy.
It's got to be for a course that you offer.
You
Yeah.
can,
And
in
go
the
to the
same way
CLEP
you would,
exam first. There's a
the student would demand or request, I have learning I want to have, that I want to document and have assessed. What avenue do you have available for me?
So that's raising an interesting question. I don't know that we said we had to, going back to David's question yesterday, offer all students an option for prior learning assessment. So we said we had to have a program in place, but we haven't, I don't think we've really pushed the envelope to the degree of saying every student has to have a PLA option.
Okay, so then I spoke wishfully.
But how do you say no?
Well, that comes back to the question that I asked yesterday too, about the list of courses for which you can get portfolio credit. And when we create the network of assessors in the ALC, are we going to have a list where, you know, the person that I have who's gone through training is a criminal justice professor, and he is a trained assessor now? Is it now his responsibility to say, I will offer portfolio assessment for these 3 courses, here's the syllabus and here's the rubric by which I will evaluate it, and that goes in a list on the website, and the student says, okay, I can get those 3 courses? Or does my point person student advisor person meet with that student, realize they have a background in criminal justice, and say, oh, I need to connect you with that assessor, and they'll talk to you and see which course you should apply for credit for. I mean, which cart before the horse, how do we do it, and do we limit it? I guess is.
I like option A, we just haven't done it yet.
Right, and that's what Valdosta has from what I've seen on their website. They got a
And-
list of courses, rubrics, and syllabi.
And this is sort of part of the problem of where we're going with an online consortial degree as well, and all of those discussions with SACS yesterday. So if you are outsourcing, if you will, your assessment, then we again run up into all those SACS issues that came up yesterday. So what we had envisioned doing, we have to make sure SACS is going to work with us, but what you're describing is what I would envision. I'd be interested in hearing what the rest of the group thinks. I mean, I think our idea was that we're going to not have to train a CJ faculty member at every institution. And it also sort of solves,
It
to a
limits.
degree, some of the financial issues, because if a faculty member is committed to doing portfolios times 3 or times 5 or times 10, the more portfolios that faculty member gets, the more we're at least going above $250. Could you share with them the way you're paid, or, I mean, the framework for paying faculty assessors at DePaul or some other places you would recommend, or?
Well, what I recommend, at School for New Learning, where I am at DePaul, which is an adult, has adult programs for adults, as a full-time member of the faculty, if I'm assessing a student's prior learning and I'm assessing it, I'm not extending or adding a clear instructional element to it, I assess it just as part of my load. I don't get compensation, additional compensation.
And how much of this are you expected to do as part of your load? Is it enumerated in some way?
No, as much as I'm willing to do.
Okay.
Now, if we have someone who's maybe a member of our part-time faculty who really has expertise in this area that I or other full-time faculty might not have, then this is graduate program. Undergraduate, we pay $150 for an assessment. In the graduate programs, we pay $150 for every credit hour that's demonstrator.
Now we're getting closer to what we need. That's closer to what we need as a model,
Okay.
I think.
And I have to say, there's that fine line. Philosophically, I think that any kind of assessment is part of an instructional activity. But we say, if you're submitting the work to me, and I'm going to maybe give you feedback once, because maybe there's something you missed or you need to elaborate, that's still considered assessment. But if we get beyond 2 feedback loops, then the student has moved into what we would call a guided independent study. Then they need to pay tuition credit.
And is that the money the faculty get, is it extra compensation over and above
It
their
is.
regular pay? So it's not a part of their load?
Right.
But for you, it is part of your
For
load.
me, as a full-time, if it's assessment, not the guided instruction, then that is part of my load as a full-time faculty member. That is not a happy policy among our faculty. You know, really, people would either prefer that it be more clearly marked within our load, or be extra payment. So it goes back to your question about the business model.
Let me ask another.
Well, I mean, it's not like we're even going to necessarily have our own way about this, because some of this is going to wind up being dictated to us,
By
right? The state, by the federal government. right, by the market, I think. And we're gonna have, you know, you don't want to be the last buggy whip standing, so to speak. I mean, do I think 100% of students are gonna learn this way? No, I don't.
No.
Okay, I think most students can't. But I don't know that I want to give up 30% of my market to the 30% who can,
Yeah.
okay? And I don't want to retrench 30% of my faculty. And I know they don't want that. And so that's why I think it's really important that we come up with a business model that keeps us from doing that. Okay, and I think that a lot of the problems that have been raised really aren't problems. I mean, we've got different tuitions, but that doesn't matter, because you can set, if you will, the price at 85% of whatever your tuition is. Okay, and that way we just keep the same general relationship, right? Not, then, you know, I pulled the 85% out of thin air here.
So
whatever
proportion
it is.
to what you are.
Right,
proportionate
and so,
to.
you know, if our tuition is double yours, then our 85% is double yours, and, you know, we're in no better a competitive situation relative to you than we were before, okay? And so we're not gonna have a rush to the cheapest provider of assessment and validation, which is, I think, the surest way to kill this, okay? Because then people are going to, you know, A, take advantage of it, and B, then malign the outcome.
So at School for New Learning, where I am, we made the decision to do, we're a private institution, so our credit hour is over $500 a credit hour for undergraduate, $555 for graduate. We set our assessment fee to be competitive with even the community colleges, the the public institutions, because we want those students.
Right, and you're viewing this as a way of increasing your market share, in effect. I'm a chemist, I hate to talk business, I really hate. But, I mean, that's kind of what you've done. And, you know, I used to be at a private college, we did exactly the same thing, right? For adult learners and so forth, people who were not normally in our pool.
Right.
Okay, and, you know, and so the guy from ACE was saying doing this isn't gonna cost you anything, okay, because it's expanding your pool. And that's true until the point that whatever is your traditional students start doing this, okay, at which point it isn't true.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, there are institutions where, as you know, the adult population, learner population has exceeded the so-called traditional, and the adult degree program is financially supporting the institution, and then a lot of policies and business models have had to change, because some of those decisions that were made to provide access for the adult learners over time is not a financially feasible approach. So I think you're saying we need to be, let's keep looking ahead to.
Right. And set up policies that whatever degree this happens works.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know if this is going to be 5%, I don't know if this is going to be 35%, I don't know if this is going to be 50%, I'm pretty sure it's not going to be more than that. Okay, but I don't know. And, you know, if it winds up being 2%, then, you know, the people who want to ignore it can get away with it. Okay, 2%, it really doesn't matter. Okay, if it winds up being 25%, which I think there's a strong likelihood for, you can't ignore that.
And what I think you're suggesting or requesting is let's have this be a system, a consortium.
And let's not we were talking about giving away what did he call it, the barn? Yeah, we always call it giving away the store. Maybe we're a more urban campus. I don't know. But yeah, I don't want us to give away the store in terms of what we charge per credit. I think that's setting a very dangerous precedent that will be very harmful to us.
Mark, I think I cut you off at one point. Do you? Okay.
I have a quick, very pedestrian question. I realized I'm fuzzy on something very basic here. When do you decide that something is evaluated via portfolio versus a challenge exam? How do you make that determination?
We've laid out portfolio as the method of last resort. That you would go to CLEP, you'd go to Dantes, you'd go to challenge exams, you'd go through all the other options first, and then only go to portfolio.
What do you mean go go through the challenge exam option?
Well, like, for instance, I can look, I got the list of, here are all the courses for which you can take a CLEP exam and get equivalency. So we're gonna check that first if the student says they have knowledge in a certain area, after you've evaluated the ACE credits and that kind of stuff. I'll look at the list of all the exams that are the Dante's or whatever the acronym is now, and see if there's one there that's applicable. And then I only have a few departments that have challenge exams. So if the student is bringing experience in that field, I would refer them to that challenge exam. If I've exhausted all of those other opportunities, and at this point, if we have an assessor on our campus in that area, we would talk about submitting a portfolio and connect with the assessor to see if the assessor also feels that this student is a good candidate.
You wouldn't ask someone to create a challenge exam for this student?
I haven't had that discussion yet.
I've had that discussion. I've had students come with, you know, they've got Spanish, and I've gone to the department chair and said, would this be something appropriate to have a challenge exam for? And they actually said, yes, it would. We'll have one ready, you know, for the student when the student wants to take it.
Instead of CLEP, or is it a level beyond what you get
It was
CLEP
like a
credit for?
criminal justice Spanish that didn't apply to
Spanish for
CLEP.
law enforcement.
Yeah. And they said, yeah, we'll make it a challenge exam. And I told the student that. She's like, oh, that sounds hard. I'll just take the class. But, you know, she had the option, and now we've got the exam in place. And so the next time somebody comes along. And so we've kind of left it up to the department chairs. If you want to make an exam, does it make sense for you to do that? And so far, they've been willing.
One of the reasons I asked this, I just realized yesterday in our policies I looked, the student basically has a right to ask for a challenge exam for any course on campus. You're not recording this. But I didn't realize that, but they have a right to request one. Doesn't say anything about how quickly it has to be delivered or anything, but I can ask to. I
The
can
way you've
challenge
written
any
your
course.
PLA policies,
No,
or
it's
just
not
the
PLA,
college?
it's college policy.
But how do you ethically say to a student, you know, okay, maybe you have the knowledge, maybe you don't. Maybe you've met the learning outcomes, maybe you haven't, but we're not going to let you prove it. So, I mean, it seems to me that, you know, there's an ethical obligation to offer something.
I think that's the idea behind it, since we are not doing portfolios as a general practice, so.
Right, our departments are mostly doing challenge exams, at least at first blush, though I think a couple will go portfolio as well.
But for those that don't, then what do we do?
Well, I don't know that they'll have
For
that
that
choice. I don't know that they'll have that choice, right, to not, you know, and again, I'm not saying that a challenge exam has to, you know, be a multiple choice exam. Okay, in many of our programs, it's not gonna look like that, okay? It's going to, no doubt, be an exam, and then you're gonna have to go in the lab and titrate something, or, you know, whatever, okay, in order to demonstrate the applied nature of whatever the course is, okay? And I think that's fine, okay? But I think you basically have to do it, which is why ultimately the question is, what are you gonna charge for it? Okay, because if you charge far less than what you're charging now for the same kid in the same class, you've now got a hole in your budget.
Let me check in on we have a few minutes left, maybe 10 in this session. One of the CAEL standards we have not touched on yet is number 9. Well, we've touched on it, but not explicitly. Number 9, all personnel involved in the assessment of learning should pursue and receive adequate training, continuing professional development for the functions they perform. So it's related in part to the issue that you've been raising about the assessor network, right? But I'm wondering, issues, questions, desires related to this particular standard in terms of the consortium?
I just have a question about what are the options for continuing professional development? I know this ALC has sent a lot of people through the DePaul workshops, but after that, what do we do?
Is that something as a consortium that we would have, you know, every 4 years, 5 years, whatever, that you have to come back for a refresher as a group? How would we, and maybe a state conference where you have ongoing professional development?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think as we discussed yesterday, we haven't established what those requirements would be for an assessor at this point. So we are assuming they are already faculty members who have this additional,
That they've gone through at least the first two courses.
well, but we've not ever said that either.
That's a
Because-
requirement? You haven't said that?
No, we have not. For example, some people have come and attended the workshops we've sponsored at the Summer Institute and done the portfolio workshops with, for example, Denise Hart.
Right.
But they may not have gone through the DePaul workshop, or they might have done a CAEL 1 day or 1 week workshop. So it's something we have not addressed as a group.
For that network, we're going to have maybe multiple paths, but some agreed upon.
Well, we would have to have outcomes, I guess.
But how's this different than your standard SACS requirement? I mean, all of our faculty assess,
True.
okay? We're talking about possibly assessing different forms of stuff, but that's really all it is. And so, I mean, all faculty already have the positive requirement to stay current with assessment and to improve their skills and to be able to assess, in effect, what we throw at them.
And so are we as institutions and as a consortium, making that explicit? Are we holding faculty accountable to that?
Well, I have a question.
Yeah.
I think from the onset, there was an understanding that we will either be trained collectively or we will go through the DePaul. And I understand that basically there are 2 stages, the first 2 workshops and then the last 2 workshops. However, that was my understanding, and I'm hearing a different thing now in terms of what those requirements are.
No, you're right in our expectations have been, and it's in your subcontracts, that part of what you'll use the money for is to train your faculty. But what we have not done is, among the consortium members, looked at one another's training and to determine whether there's any particular components of that training that all faculty assessors in a network might need to have. And I'm curious as to whether, with the faculty that you have that have gone through that training, have they come away with that with new ideas about how they might better assess student outcomes, or have they just said, oh yes, we already do that in class? Just sort of push on the point of how well versed are our faculty normally in these kinds of methods of assessment.
Yeah, my experience going through the course is the fact that it gives you a total view, and to me it's a very valuable workshop in terms of looking at the overall view of what assessment is and what skills you require to have it, so that there is no ambiguity in terms of your understanding. And that's what I got from it. And of course, you have to set up handbooks of faculty assessment also in your schools. And that gives me that kind of training and knowledge, skills, to be able to develop such resources for the college. And to me, it's a very valuable training.
We've talked about, and nothing's finalized, but we've talked about really 2 levels of assessors. We have the faculty assessors that we're calling departmental PLA coordinators that would work with the student on developing the portfolio and all that. But then they would identify a subject matter expert, because even if we have 1 per department, there's so many fields within that department that 1 person can't be the expert every place. And then they would work with the subject matter expert to do the portfolio assessment. And so that subject, in that particular model, the subject matter expert does not have to have had the PLA training. However, we are also looking at, although again, still up in the air, but looking at developing our own PLA faculty training course, so that essentially all of our faculty, 100%, if they wanted to and all that, could take advantage of that and learn more about PLA, not only for for the purposes of the consortium, but for the purposes of the variety of assessments you can do in any course. I
Yeah.
mean, it's not,
That'd be
what you
ideal.
learn in that course is not limited to PLA and portfolio assessment.
I think that sounds wonderful. I mean, we've talked
Yeah, there's
about
AEL,
how
there's
insource, how
PLA.
we might insource training as well.
It would be nice if you could do this consortium for, say, for example, for English or for math. We could probably do this consortium, just one set of guidelines for all English faculty or all English courses.
Set of guidelines of what sort?
PLA guidelines, assessment guidelines for all faculty teaching English.
One of the reasons we were looking at a PLA course for our faculty is because the General DePaul courses use a lot of soft skill examples. And many of our faculty don't relate at all to that because of the nature of what they teach, the content area they teach. And so we had hoped to have, more science, math, engineering, more hard skills as some of the examples and some of the case studies that people would be doing. But it seems to me that you're going a little far when you say you're going to have one course for English, one course for math. I mean, PLA, prior learning assessment, is prior learning assessment, although by looking at different case studies and examples, it's easier for faculty to relate it, to what they do.
Yeah.
See, I think that's perfect, and that's probably the purpose of this group. I mean, the discussion about this MIT class, I mean, this is why we have these discussions. What do you do? Creating our own case studies and sharing best practices, because it is going to come up. I mean, a lot of times is how do you assess the soft skills? Well, in your hard sciences, liberal arts, at Armstrong, we don't have problems with our faculty. They just want to be able to justify, especially in our sciences, because they do a lot of lab placement upon graduation or advanced studies. Do we want somebody getting placed in a lab that got PLA for science lab work and can't do the labs? And so it's really just validating and making sure. But I think that's just a great idea in terms of even looking at how we move forward, because each of them is really a case in itself, and it's going to be dependent on what is submitted. And so I just thought your points were really well taken.
I was what, have you looked at the Hart and Hickerson PLA portfolio book where they have examples? I'm just not remembering if they have some of those more science-oriented.
I found
cases.
some in that when I went through PLA 3 and 4, but
Not enough.
not with the range of topics that we have at SPSU. Because we have engineering technology and engineering, and then of course all the sciences.
That sounds like a great project, doesn't it? I'm not looking at you. No,
There's a huge can of worms here, okay? Because we're talking about prior learning assessment, but, prior learning assessment doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's part of assessment, okay? And, and what passes for assessment in a lot of classrooms today, live classrooms, is pretty appalling.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I think that, this is, it's kind of like, all right, I'll just reduce it to kind of its lowest denominator. It's kind of like lecturing. Okay, most people know how to lecture in front of an audience. They don't necessarily know how to do it well, but at least they know how to, go through the mechanics of doing it. Okay, and I think that, now that it's 2012 and all, right, we're moving towards a point where we're going to require our faculty to lecture, I'll say this in quotes, online. Okay, because that needs to be part of the toolkit that any faculty member has. And so, doing this, since most of us have got, just like you said, far greater mechanisms for assessing what we do online and making sure that the whatever it is there, okay, than we do for live, this is going to kind of retroactively force us
We hope
to look at what we're doing live.
We hope,
And
yeah.
so, again, I think number 9 here needs to be part of our general training of faculty for assessment, part of which, this being 2012, right, is assessment of people who come in with non-traditional,
Yep.
non-classroom knowledge. How are we going to assess it? You need to do it in the classroom, you need to do it outside the classroom. It's part of the toolkit.
Yeah, but if you don't have the skill sets in terms of the topics that are required.
Because we're running
typically
out.
assess
Do you have
a
any
student
comment you want to
program,
make?
I think that's where the disadvantage comes in. And we're saying that in order to be effective,
Okay.
you've got to have a skill set in terms of the techniques that you apply to any assessment. And that is what the cost of teachers.
No, I agree. But what I'm saying is we hire lots of faculty who we really don't know when we hire them as to whether they have effective assessment skills, notwithstanding
Yeah.
prior learning assessment skills.
I mean, you're looking at pedagogy, assessment. I can't tell you the percentage of faculty that probably come in that have not gone through a course in pedagogy and assessment. If you're a K through 12 teacher, it's a requirement. The challenge is when you go into higher education, it's more based on your experience, the professional skills that you bring, but unless you're requiring somebody to go through, and again, looking at your training, we're trying to do a lot through the online and blended, because technically, if you teach a hybrid course is distance education, which is bound by federal compliance. If 1 hour of lecture, according to USG data mart definitions, is replaced 1 hour online, it has to be reported out as a hybrid course, which makes it fall under distance ed regulations. So what are you doing within that hour? So at Armstrong, we're saying if you're going to teach a hybrid, a partially online or a fully online course, you need to go through and get this certificate that will look at pedagogy, andragogy, neuroplasticity, which is the brain-based learning, 508 compliance, all of the things that are required by SACS, because you don't want to end up being a non-compliant program because you didn't know. And for the faculty that have gone through our programs, almost all of them said, I didn't think about this. It was not something that was brought to my attention. But they're complete experts in their field. But when you get hired, nobody says, oh, go through the training. Workshops are optional. But once you understand and they're linked to the outcomes and the regulation, it changes things. So.
Well, and just when you hire faculty to teach on campus, they could be there 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and you never know whether or not they have decent assessment skills or lecturing skills or anything else.
Yeah.
You know?
And again, I think a lot of this new normal is going to force us to change our business model, and it's not just about what we charge. So, the graduate schools that are producing our faculty, what are our expectations for them in terms of preparing people who are prepared to teach? Currently, we don't have any expectations of them.
Well, most
That's
of
a
those
mistake.
PhD programs are driven by the discipline and not by the pedagogical practices or by
That's right.
andragogy.
And sadly, like the areas where I teach, it shows.
Yeah.
So Catherine asked if I had any last words, and my mind is spinning a little bit too much to have a nice bow tie on the package, other than to say this has just been a hugely invigorating conversation, and I think you're absolutely right. We need to be ahead of that curve and thinking through those implications. I'm a little daunted by the idea that the consortium can do that. So that may be something in terms of how do we translate some of this thinking into action as we move forward. So I'm going to leave it there. And
Well, I think that, you're bringing out some really key decision points, and that is a very powerful thing, to be able to do, because there are so many issues and so many connecting threads. So if you can really center on, as I think this conversation's been trying to do, when we talk about the new normal or the business model, it's not just the finances, but it has implications for faculty roles, responsibilities, ongoing training, and really setting new standards, better standards for learning, teaching and learning. So I think that a lot of this conversation that will be fed to Mary Ellen, and as she's already planning the Summer Institute, my sense is that this is going to be a key theme.